Welcome to In the News for October the 18th, 2024. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. There was no fanfare. There wasn't even like any excitement, but Apple dropped a pretty big bombshell, or actually a pretty small bombshell. The mini vacation is over. We've been talking about this, wondering if, when, or if Apple was ever going to release a new version of the iPad mini, and we got our answer this past week. You did a good write-up on it. Other people were like a little surprised. Everybody was like, I had no idea. Just a few tiny incremental updates, but important nonetheless.
Yeah, the iPad mini is an interesting product because while it's beloved, Apple does not update it very often. And as a result, after a few years, and it happens over and over and over again, people often wonder, was that the last one? Is Apple going to ever do another iPad mini? You never know. So you have that factor in the background. And then another factor in the background has been that there has been a rumor, speculation, whatever you want to call it, that Apple might have another event sometime this month. And one of the things that people thought that they might show off would be a new iPad mini. And yet, like you said, instead of having any formal fanfare, they just dropped a press release and said, there it is. So will they still have an event later on this month with new Macs? Maybe, who knows? Last year they did one on Halloween, but and called it a scary event with the Macs for Halloween. So anyway, but that's just sort of the backstory of it. I mean, the big thing is that for people who enjoy the Mac Mini, they now have one that's going to be a little bit more powerful. And so if you have an older one that you're looking to upgrade, now you can do so. And it's interesting because the reviews of this that have come out over not say reviews, because I don't think anyone has one in their hands yet, but the commentary over the last couple of days has really been sort of two camps. On the one hand, you have people saying, as you alluded to, this is a very minor update. It's so similar to the iPad mini that was introduced 3 years ago. And that's true, because really the only major change is the processor, and the processor itself is not like a latest and greatest, M4 processor or something crazy like that. It's the processor, the A17 Pro, that was introduced 1 year ago in the high-end iPhones. So, and I want to come back to that because there's actually an interesting other story about that as well. But so yeah, it's just a little bit faster of an iPad mini without any major new features. I mean, it supports the new Apple Pencil Pro and some other stuff like that. But those are the people saying, what's the C here? But then the flip side of it is for the people that really love an iPad mini, I mean, it is a different device. People are not looking to do a lot of the major computational features that you might want to do with an iPad Pro. The sort of the nature of the iPad mini, and I've owned one before, and I think you've owned one before. It's 1.2.
I have. Yep.
Yeah. It's just because it's such a tiny little, it's your little buddy, it's like
so cute.
It's this tiny little cute thing, and it's so light and it's so small, and you can just sit there and read your stuff on your couch, and it's a bigger screen than an iPhone.
With one hand. It's a one-hander. That's the whole thing. You can just hold it. Right.
So in my mind, expectations with an iPad mini are not very high. And I don't mean that in a bad way, like, oh, well, we don't expect much from it. It's like, we don't want it to do a lot. We just want it to be this cute little device that you read, you read web pages on, stuff like that. And so for something like that, you've got the great form factor. It's been the same since day one for this thing, basically. Why break what's not broken? The only thing that it might want is to have a little bit better processor that will now support Apple Intelligence once that starts to come out in about 2 weeks. So, so why not, it makes perfect sense to me. Why not just put a new processor in it, maybe a tiny thing here or there, like some slightly updated radios for Wi-Fi, but, just whatever, just to use the latest equipment, and then be done with it. So I actually I'm in favor of this. How about you?
Definitely. And I think, one thing that you just barely mentioned that I haven't seen a lot of people kind of talk with about quite so much is it does support the Apple Pencil Pro. I haven't had an iPad mini for a long time, Jeff. But one of the other articles that you linked to noticed something that I guess I just even take for granted. We see them all the time, like in restaurants. A lot of times, this is what the this is the platform of the device that the waiters will use. I see it sometimes in some of like point of sale aspects. Like I can tell that it's an iPad mini. Like when I check in somewhere, at a doctor's office or something like that. So I mean, there is still a market, and I think one of these other articles that you linked to was just talking about this. This is really from a business standpoint. I mean, obviously Apple has all the numbers. They know how many that they sell, and they obviously felt like that it was at least still something. We're gonna throw another couple of crumbs to the business world, right? To say here's a little bit of an update, to the iPad Mini, like it's still a sort of, it's still going, like we still are offering this, but they did support that Apple Pencil Pro. And I just thought that was a little bit interesting, a little bit more RAM, a little bit faster with those processors. But yeah, go ahead and talk about those processors. I thought that was an interesting story as well as to what
Yeah.
some people have been thinking why it's there.
Yeah, you know which one I'm referring to. So,
I
like, the
do.
issue is when Apple came out with the iPhone last year, they wanted to have a faster 3 nanometer processor, and so they came up with this thing called the A17 Pro. But because of the way it was developed, it turned out that it was really too expensive. It wasn't really the future of the company. So this year we have the A18. It's a better processor that's easier to make, and people thought that the A17 Pro was going to be a one-off. We would see it and never see it again for technical reasons that go a little bit beyond my understanding. But one of the things is the A17 Pro for last year's high-end iPhones had a 6 GPU in it. And what's
Right.
noticeable is that for the iPad Mini, it only has 5 GPUs. Now, why would you would
Oh.
not make something with fewer? Why would they do that? Well, apparently what happens is when you make these chips in a lab, this is totally routine that, you'll test, you'll make, the first 10 of them, and out of the 10,
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2 have some small part of it that's not working. So what they'll do is they'll just turn off some of those little parts of it that are not working. But instead of throwing that chip away, they will just sort of set it to the side, and then they'll
Right.
say, okay,
Right.
this one doesn't have all 6 working, but it's got 5 worth. So they just sort of stick it in a separate bin. They call this binning it. And so
Mm-hmm.
part of the thought process here was that it may have been that, Apple, when they make these processors and they go to these companies like Taiwan Semiconductor, they basically just say, just make
Right.
them all, and we're just going to buy them all. It may have been
Right.
that they
Right.
literally had a bin of these chips that they weren't going to put in the iPhone, and they're done making an iPhone. Like,
Right.
what
Right.
do we do with these? And you can almost imagine saying to someone, "Hey, let's just throw them in the iPad Mini or something like that."
Yeah.
So it may have literally been leftover chips that they're like, anybody got anything else to do with it here? Well, why not stick an iPad Mini?
What else can we do?
And then the flip side is, and another explanation that people come up with is it may have been that Apple decided that when they had this chip run, the A17 Pro, they may have said, we're going to buy, I don't know, 10 million of them, or whatever that number is.
Right.
And they were just
Right.
committed to that number, and they've got that leftover demand that they have to do. It's like, okay, well, we got to
Right.
make some more. So we'll stick them in the iPad Mini. And, it may well be that some of them in the iPad Mini actually may have all parts of the chip working, but they'll just turn
Right.
off that ones that they all have the same specs and stuff like that. So it's an interesting theory. I don't know if that's what happened or not. But anyway, but for the end
Fun
user,
to think about. Yeah.
yeah, none of this matters for the end user. I mean, the bottom line is you've got a fun little device that you can use. It's going to be a little bit faster. And, when I do my reviews of things like this, I often like the review that I did this week. I call, why
Yeah.
lawyers will love. This is the one that I always sort of, in my head, this is not the device that a lot of professionals are going to want to use, because with the
Uh-huh.
screen so small, you can't, if you're reading documents, things are smaller. It's harder to
Yeah.
read them. And so for me, this would never be the one that I would want to use in my practice, for reading exhibits and for reading testimony and for reading documents and working on Word documents. But that doesn't mean that it's not a very nice device. And if you've got,
Right.
better vision than I do, maybe you don't mind, but the trade-offs, I hear people say this all the time. They just love that small little device. And whether you're using it for just casual
Right.
reading your email and surfing the web, or maybe you are using it for work and you just want to have something really, really small, and it could not be more portable than this. You could basically stick it in a coat jacket. So
Right.
the
Right.
iPad Mini is a special device. I'm so glad to see Apple update it, if for no other reason to say it's going to
Yes.
keep up with the times and remain a product that Apple sells for that very small portion of people for whom this is perfect.
Speaking of which, they kept it at the same price, right? The starting price remains
Same price.
$499, which
Yeah.
is great. I mean, I always enjoy and appreciate the fact when I see that Apple makes some of these updates, to phones and everything. We're always a little nervous about, is it going to stay the same price? Are we going to see a big jump? The fact that they did make some of these, even though they're minor improvements, they kept the price the same, and I feel like that's always a real good nod to like the marketplace. And then lastly, I'm just going to underscore something that you said, because I thought you did a great job in here in your review of talking about this because I feel like I knew this, but I didn't recognize it so much until you said this. It's true. Like the iPad mini, really, I hate to say it this way, but I think of it as really just an ebook reader. And I wondered why I continue to do that. But when you pointed this out today, that it's because it's so good. If you have something that has dynamically sized text, I don't know if that's the best way to say that, but you said like if you want to read web pages, you could increase the size, the text size of a web page really easy, right? And so it formats into the iPad mini very well. You can resize the text of the Kindle book reader or, the iBooks reader. I mean, in other words, you can fit that to the form factor of the iPad mini very easily. You cannot, however, to your point, Jeff, resize the text really of a PDF file, right? Most of the time, right? I mean, you can, if it's a Word document or so, there's ways around it, but it's just not as easy if you have the full size iPad. So just thank you for pointing that out because I've been struggling with how do I recognize or maybe even talk to people about why you may or may not want an iPad mini. And that's it. Like if you're just going to be using this for some of those things where it's like that dynamically sized text size, it's great. It's perfect. It's like a great little side thing, one-hander that you can carry around with you. But if you're needing it for like not just legal work, but any kind of work where you're looking at documents or full on, finalized documents, that kind of a thing where you can't dynamically resize that text, then yeah, I feel like you should consider a more full-size iPad. So anyway, I just wanted to say you did a great job of pointing that out today, and it helped me to kind of put the iPad mini in its place a little bit better on that.
Let me say one thing about the price too, which you mentioned. When
yes,
Apple,
please.
The 3 years ago version, which is the iPad 6th generation, 3 years ago, they raised the price. It had been even lower, and they brought it up to $500. And that low-end one that was $500 was only 64 gigabytes. Even 3 years ago, that was pretty limited. Nowadays, if you get the cheapest one that remains at 500, instead of being 64, it's 128. And I actually think that that's a substantial change because the iPad mini is probably, for the reasons we discussed, it's probably not the one that you're going to keep tons and tons of videos and huge documents on. I think that 128, it's good for most people's use cases. This is one of those rare situations where I think that the entry level model is probably enough. Sometimes we tell people, they have the entry level model, but you might want to go up one and get the middle point. And that's fine. And of course you can do that here too. But I really do think that for the casual use that so many people have that use iPad minis, that entry level $500, now that it's got 128, thumbs up. Yeah. That's good. Like you can feel comfortable knowing that you'll use that and it's going to give you lots of enjoyment and use for years and years.
Another press release from Apple this past week was about Apple Pay, of all things. 10 years ago, my friend, October 22, 2014, you wrote about a quirky little service coming out called Apple Pay, where you can securely pay with your iPhone. Look at those screenshots, man. That's just amazing. But I remember when this first came out, because obviously Apple wasn't the first to this. There was other services where you could pay. But 10 years ago, Jeff, it was nowhere near as fully accepted as it is today. And so Apple had another press release about celebrating 10 years of Apple Pay. And I mean, I don't even have to read this press release to know how incredibly popular Apple Pay is today. I mean, just think about just a few years ago, we would not see the Apple Pay. We talked about this even last week. I mean, we still talk about this. This is where you're able to pay with your Apple Wallet. I still feel like there's some confusion of the Apple Wallet versus Pay versus Apple Cash. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, it's almost ridiculous for me today to pull out a physical credit card. I don't even want to, not just because of the convenience factor, but the security factor too, Jeff. Just really good to see that Apple, understands. And I feel like it's sort of like an undercurrent. Like I keep talking about how Apple is becoming a health company. I think they're also a financial company in that aspect, because the Apple Pay, that Apple Wallet ecosystem, again, we talked about this last week and several weeks ago as well. That's just becoming something that is embedded and weaved into the fabric of my life and my kids' life, and it sounds like you're the same way.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been 10 years. I mean, gosh,
It's crazy.
it's gone by fast. You know, on the one hand, it seems like it was yesterday that Apple announced it because, like you said, I remember thinking, Apple, this is a computer company. What are they doing in the financial services
What are you
industry?
doing?
And yet, at the same time, you know, it seems like it's been here forever, like for 100 years, because it's just so. Well, of course, you can use. I mean, I on the way to the
Yeah.
office this morning, I got myself a cup of coffee and I paid for it with my
Boom.
Apple Watch and thought nothing of it. You know, boom, and went back. And for me, it's one of those rare situations in which, you know, sometimes when you have things that are more secure, like using a password manager, it can be more complicated. But this is one of these rare
Yeah.
examples where, yeah, like you say, it is much more secure because you're not giving your credit card number to the vendor. So if they're hacked, you don't lose anything or anything like that. But it's also faster too. I mean, I really think it's the fastest way to pay is just to use your iPhone
Absolutely.
or your Apple Watch, whichever one, and pay. And I love the fact that I remember when it first came out 10 years ago, there were only a few places like Walgreens that you could use it. And
Yeah.
nowadays, it it
There you
it
go.
it really just is everywhere. So it's nice. And I know that there were other countries outside of the United States that were using tap to pay before the US was. And so even at the time, people in Europe were like, "Oh, well, of course you use tap to pay." But it was really tap to
Yeah.
pay was really not a thing in the United States until we had Apple Pay. And now it is truly everywhere and it's the way to go.
Even just now, I am looking at this press release from Apple, and they're talking about well, whoever wrote this, Jennifer Bailey, Apple's vice president of Apple Pay, and she says one
Hmm.
of my earliest memories of realizing how Apple Pay was positively impacting consumers' lives was when they rolled it out for transit in Tokyo. And so we're talking about like going to Walgreens and paying for Starbucks coffee, but I got to tell you, even when I go to Chicago all the time, Jeff, I mean, if somebody actually has like a paper transit card, it holds up the line. Like everybody
Yeah,
just whips out their iPhone and you just tap and you go right through. And that's the same in New York and everywhere else.
New York
And
too, right?
I'm just thinking like it's not just the convenience, the security, but it's just the efficiency of being able to have that. But happy birthday, Apple Pay. May there be 10 more years and many more to come after that, because it really just is becoming the way that I think we're just accepting it. Speaking of Apple Wallet now, so let's go to a little bit of a bigger picture on the financial side. You linked to a story in 9 to 5 Mac. iOS 18.1 is going to summarize now all of those little notifications you get from your Apple Wallet, which I get all the time. Like, even if I have a credit card that's in my Apple Wallet and somebody else in my family uses that credit card, I'll get a notification, or it'll tell me like if there's like auto charges that go on my credit cards, and I'll get notifications.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about this little story you linked to, that it'll kind of maybe even AI wise summarize all of those little charges, so I don't have like an individual notification for every charge.
Yeah. When we have Apple Intelligence, and again, it's coming in just a few weeks. Some of the rumors is like maybe October 28th, maybe even sooner. But it's going to have just those very first Apple Intelligence AI features. And so it's not
Right.
going to be the best ones. I mean, the best ones are coming later. But, you know, one of the big ones that's coming up front is summarizing things like emails. And again, I don't know how
Right.
relevant, how helpful that's going to be to
I
me
know.
to
We got to
summarize
see.
my emails. I got to read my actual emails. And, you know, but another thing is it can summarize notifications, and we'll see how useful it is. But this is an example of it's using that summarization feature, the ability to look at a whole bunch of data and try to pull out the most important stuff. But this is one that I could actually see useful. And that example that I listed today, which was pointed out in this article, is a great one that,
Right.
like, you know, like you said, Brad, do you necessarily need to get notifications of every individual payment? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I don't know. But it might be even more useful to say, yesterday, here's the total amount of money that you spent at Walt Disney World or whatever it
Right.
is. And
Right.
just like
Right.
I mean, and again, this is the most basic of tasks. It's just math, but it's adding things together that it understands are part of the same general
That's it.
location.
Right.
You know, I was in
Right.
Chicago yesterday and I spent this much money, or you know, you spent this much on food last week, or something like that. You know, those sorts of
Right.
summarizations in ways that actually make some sense. You know, it uses the data that it already has access to, but puts it together into a package that makes it a little bit more understandable. These are the sorts of things that make me think, hmm, okay, Apple Intelligence might really be adding something to my life that I don't already have. And again, this is just in that point one version. I don't expect to be that impressed by
Right.
a lot of the AI stuff that we're going to see this month, but it's at least the start. And then later on this year, we're going to see more. And then next year, we're going to see more. So anyway, so I was interested to read this article because this is the first time that I had heard about this specific feature, the AI in the Apple Wallet app. summarization of receipts and expenses and stuff. So interesting.
It's just little tiny tweaks like this. Like to your point, you did great. Like all it is math. It's just totaling up how many charges that you made at Walt Disney, but it puts it in like this candy AI wrapper of of like how I could add up all your charges at Walt Disney World and say, hey, by the way, Jeff, you guys spent $34, and 89 cents at Walt Disney World. I mean, somebody could manually do that. You could do that for yourself. But now if Apple Intelligence does that and sort of serves it up to me in sort of a natural language type-esque mode, that's to me where the little bit of a difference comes in. Like it's just kind of helping you like better understand it from like a human-esque transport there. But anyway, just really good. It's these little tiny tweaks I think that we're just going to start to see that is going to, I think, overall make a bigger difference on that. Speaking of another big difference in iOS 18, we have talked about this several times, messages via satellite. Because I believe, well, fortunately, what I see in the future, what I would love to see is like Apple and, X, or the company X / Starlink. I know lots of political angles and stuff that are involved in there, but my goodness, like I want a world where I don't even have to worry about cellular towers. I want to just send my messages via satellite. This was an excellent article from TidBITS, from Adam Engst, the TidBITS, for long time writer, on not just like how to go and do the test, which we have encouraged listeners to do in the past. Just test it out so that what's going to, but man, he just goes into so much detail about how to connect to a satellite, when you're not connected to a satellite, what other messages you might get. Just really a great article. Thanks for finding this week.
Yeah, I mean, this is by far the most comprehensive discussion that I've seen of it. And it's really useful because, again, this is not the sort of thing that you can just play around with on your own and sort of say, oh, how does this work? Because most of these features are only available when you are actually out of cell phone range. So, I mean, one of the things that Adam was able to do is that he lives up in the Northeast and he was able to find a city that he knew that there was no cell phone coverage in this one part of the city. And then he was able to stand there and try it. So, like, yeah, so you have to know where these areas are. But normally, in your normal everyday life, of course, it's a good thing that you're surrounded by cellular coverage. And so you can't test it. But, simple things like there is a part of the settings app which controls how this feature works, but you don't even see that option in settings unless you are connected to a satellite. He has some screenshots here so that you can actually see like the settings app, and there's the setting thing and some of the things. But like you and I, if I just wanted to sit here and take a look at that, I can't. And that's actually pretty rare. I'm trying to think. There are some parts of the settings app that only show up when you have something enabled. Like, for example, your AirPods Pro, you can only adjust
AirPods,
when they're connected.
Yeah.
So this is not the first time that there's something like that, but it's relatively rare for there to be things in settings that you only see it during certain situations. So, but then additionally, even the way it works is interesting because, you have to make your connection with the satellite by pointing in the direction, and then you send your text, and sending your text may take, 30 seconds or so. But then if you want to receive replies, if I'm in the middle of the nowhere and I wanted to text you, Brett, and say, hey, Brett, I'm in the middle of nowhere and I want to give you this message. I'm going to be late or something like that. I have to stay in view of the satellite to get the response from you. And then when you send me the message, it actually will tell you, it's going to say, Jeff is off the grid. Do you want to send it to him via satellite? So it will only send your message back to me if you choose to send it via satellite. Now, you're not on the satellite, you're just on Wi-Fi, but it's letting you know that this is a little iffy. It may get through, it may not get through, depends upon the satellite connection. And then even then it gets more complicated because there's, and he goes through the details of this, but people that are within your family set, they will get more information because they can actually get more information about your location versus just other people that you text with. So there is a ton of detail in here. And I can't tell you that I've memorized it all, but it was worth reading through once, and I may go back and read through it again. But just if you read through this, that way, at least the information will be somewhere in the back of your head so that when you're in this situation, whether it be for just fun that you're saying, hey, look at me, I'm texting you from the middle of nowhere, or if it's a dangerous situation, like you're sort of lost and you need help, you're going to want to understand how this works. So and it's not all, it is not all intuitive. I mean, there are some decisions that Apple made here that you may not understand unless you, like, for example, the fact that you need to maintain that connection with the satellite if you want to receive responses. So anyway, very, very, very good article. I cannot encourage you to read it more.
These are things you do not want to be trying out and testing when you're in an emergency situation when you actually need this.
Exactly.
Like, it's good to at least read through this right now and have some basic understanding so that you have a little bit of a leg up when and if that situation could pose itself. In a similar vein, quickly, you just also linked to another story. Apple's roadside assistance via satellite is now live in the United Kingdom. It's been in the United States, but now they are allowing that to be available via satellite. Roadside assistance, which is kind of similar. I mean, it's sort of based a little bit on the same technology. It's a little bit different the way that it works. The messages to me is a little bit more involved because the roadside assistance, I always feel like it's a little pre-programmed. Is that a good way to say it, Jeff? As opposed to messages where you might send things back and forth.
Apple has unveiled this satellite technology sort of in three waves. The first wave was you can send an SOS message to emergency responders.
Yes,
and then that,
right.
A lot of people around the world have that ability. And then the second wave was this one, is that you're not going to necessarily call 911 or whatever it is in your country, but you're going to call for roadside assistance. So it's not quite as urgent.
Right.
And like you say, that instead of a true free-flowing conversation, there's a lot of buttons that you press and send stuff. And then the third wave, as Apple develops the technology even more, is the full sending messages to people. Doesn't have to be an emergency. And so the UK is currently one step behind the United States. Presumably at some point in the future, they will expand from just having emergency services and roadside assistance to also having the full messages and stuff.
Yeah, good stuff on that. Another story on the iPhone, which is good because we all are using the iPhones. Apple previews new iPhone features, including enhanced caller ID for businesses and brand logos. This, I think, would be pretty cool. It's not like a lot of businesses necessarily are calling me all the time, but sometimes I see the number, and I feel like over the years it's gotten a little bit better of actually the caller ID, like it'll identify maybe the general company as opposed to maybe sometimes it just might be the general region or the geographic region. But now, tiny little thing here, it might actually add a logo. So if you get a call from Walgreens or CVS or something, not only will you maybe see the name of the company, but you might see the cute little logo that comes along with it.
Yeah. What this is an outgrowth out of is Apple realized a few years ago that it could serve like big major companies that have a relationship with Apple who want to communicate with you. And the thing that they came up with first is the Messages app, that you can use Messages to communicate with a business in sort of a secure chat. And I've done this before with Apple all the time, where like I have an issue and I don't want to go to the store and I don't want to get on the phone, but I want to sort of work through a problem, and you can just use Messages. But it's part of the Messages app, but it's a part of the Messages app that the colors are different, and you're having this secure communication with that company. So this takes that same idea from the Messages app and brings it into the telephone, so that it is a telephone call, but it's not the regular, Joe Schmo telephone call that you have with a friend or your family member. This is with a business that has shown Apple, this is who we are. Here's the numbers that we use. And so it's nice from the user because, like you say, in addition to just having whatever normal caller ID, it could add something like a photo that you would never have as a part of the normal cell phone caller ID service. And so when you see that photo, that the logo from the company or whatever, it makes it more clear to you who's calling you. It's also a form of security that you actually know that
security.
This is the company calling me. This is not some hacker that's pretending like they are with Microsoft and they want me to tell them my password or something crazy like that. You can actually see the logo there. So there's a security aspect. There's something to make it easier for businesses to communicate with people. I think that this is really cool. I'm glad that they're continuing to push the envelope this way.
For technology professionals of a certain vintage, Jeff, there is still a lament for a physical keyboard on the devices. We remember the old Blackberries, etc. We have reported on a small company that has tried to provide physical keyboards for the iPhone. Well, I would say better than try. They have actually done it. And I love this. Fernando Silva is probably one of the best people that I've been, that you've linked to before, reporting on a company called Clicks. They have a Clicks keyboard, which is literally a case for your iPhone, is the way I describe it, that at the bottom has a physical keyboard. And so he reported today, you linked to a story where he is talking about the Clicks keyboard that has been updated and improved to generation 2 for the iPhone 16. And I got to tell you, reading through this, I kind of want to try one. I mean, I mean, it makes the phone a little bit bigger, and I don't like that, but just sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, well, you and I talked about this not quite a year ago when they had their first generation for last year's iPhones. And, it's
Right.
a little bit of a pain that when you have cases like this, you have to get a new device when there's a new, phone because it's new sizes and stuff. But at least, they have updated it for the new iPhone 16 line, which is good. And it does have some additional features. Like you may remember, Brett, we were talking about, again, almost a year ago, that first generation one did not support MagSafe. And so you would have to take the
Yes,
case
I
off
remember.
if you wanted to charge and put it back on again. Now this one's got that built in, so you don't have to remove the case, and it's
Yeah.
also got some more advanced features that you can use in terms of accessing operating system type features with dedicated keys and stuff. And so it's truly an upgrade. I mean, this shows that the company that makes this, they didn't just sit there on their laurels. I mean, they took the feedback
Right.
of what people liked and didn't like about the first model, and they came up with the second model. Now, some things are still inherent to it that because it adds to the bottom of your iPhone to put a
Right.
keyboard, and because the iPhone is already pretty large, I mean, you end up with a super, super long iPhone, which
Very
some people
long.
say is very
Yeah.
awkward in your pocket. But they also did something to sort of support the back of it a little bit more to make it hold it a little bit easier if you're typing on it. So again,
Okay.
this is a very niche product, but so many people,
Niche.
like you say,
Yeah.
Brett, that have been using smartphones for forever. We cannot forget that BlackBerry experience of there was something to be said for
Correct.
typing with that little chiclet keyboard. And if you want to go back, whether it's just for
Yes.
nostalgia reasons or for real practical reasons, if you want to go back to memory lane and actually have the keyboard, and there are some practical things that we talked about this last time that when you have an external keyboard like this, it means that the keyboard is not taking up any of the space on your screen. So you can see your
Right.
entire
Bigger
screen,
screen.
and then you
Right.
have the keyboard,
I
just
like
like if
that.
you connected like an external keyboard, but this one's connected. So how much did you see the price on this? It's
Yeah, he said it's
139.
139, 149
Yeah.
for the Pro
So,
version and
it's
159 for the Pro Max. Yeah.
I think that's probably reasonable for what you get here, and I think it's an interesting product. The last time the reviews from people were that it was a really good product, but not one that you ultimately wanted to keep it on your iPhone all the time. And I
All
suspect
the
that
time.
people would say the
Right.
same thing for this one. But I could actually see, throwing it in your bag or throw it in your purse and have it when you want it and take it out. And so I actually think that there's something here. I really do. That's why I don't know that I would buy one myself, but if I
I just
have,
want to
but then
try it.
again, I actually want to try it. And part of me
I
thinks that if I
know.
tried it, I actually would want to have it. I don't know. It's a neat product.
Well, thank you, Fernando, for continuing to report on this because I don't see a lot of people writing about this. But I mean, even the MagSafe, like you can tell, like you said, this company, Clicks Keyboard, is listening to the feedback because they actually put in a couple of features that Fernando had talked about in that last one, which I think is really good. He actually does say down here that it passed his skinny jeans pocket test. Now, I don't know about you, but if you see this picture, I mean,
That's a
that's
lot
a
of iPhone.
lot of iPhone in a pocket there. But anyway, just really cool. I appreciate that Fernando continues to
Good.
report on that. Even better news now, you can order waffle fries directly from CarPlay in your car. I thought this was great. You know what this made me think of quickly is maybe a year ago, a few months ago, I remember that Dunkin' Donuts app was available in CarPlay. And I remember before we recorded, I drove to my Dunkin' Donuts and ordered my coffee through the CarPlay app, which I have to say is limited. It's not like the full app experience. And it sounds like that link that you linked to today. Now, Chick-fil-A offers an app in CarPlay. And again, it's not the full app experience, but if you have, your go-to order, you got your sandwich and your waffle fries and your your lemonade, it's like you can just tap order that again and it recognizes your payment method and apparently I think your local, obviously it knows where you are, so it's going to order from the closest location. I just love this. I mean, anything that I know comes to enhance CarPlay, I'm for, even if it's Chick-fil-A and yay waffle fries.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want to have the full menu because then you're distracted and you're going to get into an accident while you're
Yeah,
driving.
exactly.
But, I can actually understand that if you go to that Dunkin' Donuts, regularly enough that you always get the same
Yeah,
thing, or Chick-fil-A, you always get the same thing, and that you can just order ahead from CarPlay and
tap.
have it ready for
Right.
you. In fact, it was interesting. Just the other day, my son went to Chick-fil-A because we do like Chick-fil-A and we get it sometimes. And he went to go pick some up from our family. And he said that at the Chick-fil-A he went to, there were like two car lines. There was one car line for
Of
people that had
course.
ordered ahead, and it was short. And there was another car line for people that were ordering there, and it was
Look
long.
at
And
that.
what he was saying was, "Oh, Dad, I should have ordered like on the app or here on CarPlay." He's like, "Before I got there,
Sure.
because then I could have gotten in the shorter line because Chick-fil-A's are infamous for having long lines of cars coming out of them.
Right.
So because they're so popular. So, thumbs
Right.
up. Why not? It's good for Chick-fil-A to have a feature like this. And I suspect that people that actually get to use it are going to find it to be pretty useful.
I love it. I love it. We've talked about the AirPods normal, AirPods regular, AirPods 4, which is not AirPods Pro. This is just getting too confusing, Jeff, on all of this. But Jason Snell this past week wrote his review of the AirPods 4 with active noise cancellation, which is different than the AirPods 4 without active noise cancellation. And I just like the fact that you linked to it today, and it just emphasizes something we've been talking about, that while it's good, the AirPods 4 with noise cancellation are good. They're not quite as good as the AirPods Pro that, of course, all come with active noise cancellation. And really what it just comes down to is the silicone ear bud, right? I mean, he said that's really what helps on the seal aspect.
What I thought was the most interesting and helpful part of this review is that a lot of people are going to go into an Apple store and say, I want AirPods, I want noise cancellation. And that if you don't read this
Right.
review, you might just look at the box and look at the AirPods Pro and the AirPods 4 with noise cancellation and think, hey, they both have noise cancellation. Why don't I just pay less for the AirPods 4? And what Jason points out is, well, yes, they both have noise cancellation, active noise cancellation, but the one that you get with an AirPods Pro just works so much better. So, you get what you pay for. Now, on the other hand, there are reasons that you might still want to get the AirPods 4. I mean, it is a little bit cheaper for one thing, even though it's not quite as good
A
noise
little bit.
cancellation. And he points out that there are some, everybody's ears are different, as we've said in the past. For some people, they don't like the AirPods Pro, filling up the inside of their ear canal. To me, I don't really notice it, and I think it's very comfortable, actually, although I use a different tip, so I guess maybe I'm a proof that everybody has their own preferences. And so, so if you're a person that you already know that the AirPods Pro, you don't like something sticking in your ear canal, but you still want to get a product that has some noise cancellation, that's when I think this really makes sense. You got the low, if you the cheapest AirPods 4, if you just want to get like a teenager, their first AirPods, great to go. And then if you want to pay more for this noise cancellation, just go in it with eyes wide open. Know that you're not getting something as good as the Pro. You're not getting something as good as over-the-ear Bose or any of those sort of thing. But at the same time, you do get a form of noise cancellation that's better than nothing. So as long as you understand, as long as you understand going into your purchase what the compromises are, then you can be an educated consumer and decide what's best for you.
That's the phrase, better than nothing, because I have become such a huge believer now in protecting my hearing as much as possible. And these AirPods Pro that I have, I love it with the adaptive noise cancellation, because I just wear them all the time, especially when I'm in a big city with a lot of noise going on, because I just want to protect it. So I feel like you're right. AirPods 4 with noise cancellation is better than nothing. But I love this. This is the key paragraph for me when he goes, when Jason said, when I put my AirPods 4 with noise cancellation while the house next door is being loudly power washed, he could still hear his music, but the faint sound of power washing, and on an airplane, the faint sum of the engines. Actually, he says the hum of the engines was tamped down. But in contrast, when he put his AirPods Pro 2 in, the power washing sound was completely gone, and so was the hum of the engines. So, I mean, that's it. Like I said, it's better than nothing. But and right above there, that paragraph there, the AirPods 4 are a little less expensive, but only a little bit. Like, the AirPods Pro go on sale so often, they're Pro 2, that I feel like you can get them as low as $199, and at that point you're only looking at $20 difference. Okay, anyway, I've made this argument before on some of that, but it is good that they're offering that. Good news now, your next surgery might be done with a doctor wearing Apple Vision Pro. It's great. Apple Vision Pro is wonderful for entertainment, but it's also good for robotic surgeries. I love this story. This is from William Gallagher at Apple Insider, because, you can go a little bit more detail, but, they're having to turn and look at so many monitors in the operating room to make sure, the blood pressure or whatever else that they're monitoring all of this. But what if you could just have all those screens right in front of you so you didn't have to turn around all the time? Bravo, I say. This is wonderful. I want to see more Vision Pros in the operating procedures now.
Yeah, there are so many aspects of the story that really I thought were interesting. One of them that I never thought of before. One of them was we always say the big knock on the Apple Vision Pro, and the reason that I, can't recommend it to everybody, of course, is because it's so expensive. I mean, yes, it's a great way to watch movies, but is it worth spending $4,500 to just watch movies better? Now, for some people
Right.
who have tons of money and they're going to spend,
Probably.
15,
Right.
$20,000 on their home theater center. Well, yeah, for that person, I guess, sure, why not? But for most people, is it worth it? But as this doctor points out here, when you're in a surgery room of an operating room of a hospital, they are already spending tens of thousands of dollars on all the monitors around you. So the cost doesn't really become an issue. It's really just a question of the usefulness. And as he says, when I'm a doctor,
Right.
I need something that has, if I'm going to wear something like goggles on my face that have a virtual display, the resolution needs to be super, super high because you're performing surgery, for goodness sakes. I mean, obviously, you don't want to like miss and poke into the wrong area. And so this is the first device that actually has high enough resolution that you can wear it while you're doing something as important and life-saving as surgery.
Right.
And yet,
Right.
those displays, the information that the doctor needs to see of, I don't know what your vital signs are and all that other stuff, you can just sort of, have these little virtual things in places that in real life you could never literally put a display there because it would be on
Right.
top of the other people. But in a virtual world, you can just sort of glance to your top left, glance to your top right, and you can see those screens and get back to it. So like that makes it better.
Wow.
And this is the
Wow.
part that made sense to me before. Well, of course, that's nice that you can see things virtually. But what I did not realize is he said that one of the big things that causes surgeons, I mean, gosh, what a horrible job, not a horrible, but what a hard job to be a surgeon, that you're on your feet and you're moving around and you have
Yeah.
to have such precise control. I can imagine your muscles much get tight. He said that in real life, when surgeons are going back and forth between looking at different displays, it actually puts a toll on your body. And it's a reason that some people may retire from surgery. Whereas with something like
Oof.
this, where you
Yeah.
don't have to move around as much, it can actually, help the body of the surgeon himself at the same time that he's helping the body of the
That's
person he's
so
saving.
great.
I would have never thought
Yeah.
about that before in my life. And this is just one of these examples of it's just truly eye-opening where, it's better for the surgeon. The cost is not really an issue. It's really a no compromise. This is a better solution. And again, we're only at the first generation today. Who knows where it's going to be in 2 years,
Oh,
5 years? You can totally
absolutely.
understand. I have no doubt that this is going to be the future of surgery. We're going to be at a point
Agreed.
5, 10 years now that every doctor, of course, you're going to put on your virtual glasses. Why would you perform surgery without them? It's
Why
going
wouldn't
to get
you?
to that point.
Exactly.
When you read articles like this, you're like, oh, this really, really makes
This is
sense.
it. He said, the surgeon says, I'm usually turning around and stopping the operation to look at a CT scan, looking to see what happened with the endoscopy, which is another small camera, and then looking at the monitor for the heart rate. Like, that's a lot of information. But if you could have all of that, like, organized in one place where you could just glance up without having to turn your whole body and pause the operation, to your point, Jeff, that's great. And then lastly, I love this down here. We talked about this, the expense of the Apple Vision Pro. He says the monitors in the operating room are probably $20,000 to $30,000. So $3,500 for a headset is like budget dust in the healthcare setting. I love that. Like, okay, that's the way I'm going to think about the Apple Vision Pro from now on. This is budget dust in this because it's going to be like you said. Why wouldn't you do that?
Great
Okay,
article.
we're gonna have a new segment. We're gonna have to have a music or a little thing in the show because we always
In
love
the
talking
show.
about what different shows are on. Most of the time, we're talking about Apple TV Plus, but we talk about Amazon Prime and some of the others. But you had several links at the bottom of your post today, Jeff, which I just thought was great. First one, this one is pretty serious and. This wasn't even on my radar, but it's going to be now. It's basically a documentary on Afghan women after the Taliban took over in 2021, right? Yeah, called
Mhm.
Bread and Roses. Thanks for linking to this today. I'm going to be looking forward to this in November, I think, is when that's coming out. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a documentary. It was produced by Jennifer Lawrence and some other big people. And
Yeah.
They are. It's fascinating. I mean, we were just talking about doctors. I mean, it amazes to me that in Afghanistan, you had
Yeah.
women that were doctors. I mean, they were one of the most complicated, high-end professions. And as soon as the Taliban take over, it's like, nope, you can no longer have a job. You can no longer
Hmm.
be out in public without covering your face. You can only talk to a man. I mean,
Right.
we've come so far. I mean, of course, our country has never been as horrible towards women as this country is now. I mean, you don't want to get political about it, but I mean, these are just human rights violation. It's hard to
Yeah.
believe that in
Yeah.
this day and age there are countries where someone's rights could be so severely tramped upon just because they happen to be a woman instead of a man. I
Yeah.
still can't believe it. And so this documentary looks like it's going to be very powerful, and it'll probably be hard to watch, but at the same time, I
Yeah.
think it'll be
I think
important to
so.
watch. And so that comes out in a month. I'm looking forward to that one. It's called, what is it called again? Bread and
Bread and roses.
Bread and Roses. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, one like it follows at least four women, maybe a few more, but one of the women is a doctor, and they're just talking about how she's sad to close up her clinic. And anyway, just really good. Like I said, it wasn't on my radar, but I'm glad that you linked to it.
Hmm.
What has been on my radar, I almost feel guilty for going to the fun stuff after talking about something that's so
Yeah.
serious. The Vince Vaughn series, Bad Monkey. No spoilers. In fact, I haven't read this interview because you said not to.
Yeah.
We've
Don't
only
yet.
like I think about 3 or 4 series in shows in, which I got to tell you, it starts off not really slow, but it's like, okay, we like it, we'll give it. But man, by the third or fourth episode, I'm like, what? So anyway, this is good. We've been looking forward to this. I think Vince Vaughn is we just enjoy him. Like some people love him, some people hate him. I get it, but
Yeah.
I just feel like this is a great series here.
Yeah, in fact, when the series was being promoted, you and I talked about it on the podcast, and you said you were interested. I meant to ask you, and I was curious if you finished it yet. So you're still in the middle of
No,
it. But I would tell
yeah,
you, it's a fantastic role for Vince Vaughn. He plays it so well. Bill
yeah,
Lawrence,
he
who's done
does.
so many things. He did Ted Lasso. He's done Scrubs. He's done a million shows. Spin City, if you want to go way back when, to Michael J. Fox.
Wow,
Bill Lawrence knows how to make a good TV show, and he has just hit it out of the park. The books
it's
here,
good.
I'm forgetting the name of it, but the author of the book series is somebody that was not on my
Oh,
radar screen, but
Carl. Yeah,
uh,
Hyacin. Is that
there you
right?
go.
The tackle.
He had
Okay. Yeah.
that sounds right. But my wife had read a number of his books. In fact, a couple years ago, we took a family vacation down to Key West, and because many of his stories take place in that
Oh
part of
yeah.
Florida, Miami and Key West,
Oh,
she picked up one of his books just because it was like, a
it was Key
local,
West.
you
Right.
you want to travel somewhere and then read a book about it. So she knew the stories, and she said it was going to be a great show if it was good as the book, and sure enough, it is. So what excites
Oh,
me is,
good. Okay.
Brett, you're going to love the rest of the season. It stays
Yes.
good to the end. And when you watch that last episode, you're going to say, I want more. And the good news
Oh,
is
okay. Well
that
then.
we are going to have more because they've already picked up a second season. In fact,
Yay!
Bill Lawrence
Okay.
said he has a 3-season plan. Now, as I understand
Oh,
correctly, the
good.
author
Good.
has written 2 books in this series. So Bad Monkey was the first book. And then there's a second book that they're going to either make 1 or 2 seasons out of that. Now, I think that's as
Okay.
many as the author has written. So in this article, you will see that Vince Vaughn and Bill Lawrence say that they could actually see doing many, series of this.
Ooh,
So
okay. I
at
like
some point
it.
they'll finish up the books and they'll have to sort of come up with stories of their own. But it's a great character. It's a great cop show. Vince Vaughn's awesome. It's
I
funny.
can't wait.
It's
I
oh,
can't
I
wait.
love it. I love it. I love it.
Um, Another show that we have talked about many times, Slow Horses, which again,
So
no
good.
spoilers. We watched the first 2 seasons and just were glued to it, like binged it. It was ridiculous. Went to bed too late. We haven't started the wait. Is this the 3rd season or is this the 4th season now? I'm sorry. Maybe I'm getting mixed up now because now they've announced the 6th season coming up. Oh my goodness, so many shows.
So the 4th season has just finished airing. So I just finished watching the
Okay,
4th
that's what I
season
haven't watched.
last
Okay.
weekend. And it's a great season. So look forward to it. In fact, you learn some stuff about the characters, some great backstory stuff.
Oh,
But again, talk about the books. The author of the books has written tons and tons of these books. So they have lots of books to go. So the 4th season is aired. Season number 5 is in production right now, and I think it's
oh
going to
my
come out
goodness.
next year. And then season number 6, they've already greenlit. And in fact, we may have mentioned this before
Woo!
with the 6th season. I mean, this has got to. I don't know of any Apple TV show that has had 6 seasons
Oh,
greenlit yet.
so this is new. Okay.
This will become like the one of the longest Apple TV Plus shows for sure. And then I mean, I guess as long as the actors want to keep making them, there's more books out there, so we could see even more, which is exciting because this every one of these seasons is so good. The
So
acting is so
fun.
good. It's so intense.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's a spy thriller. Oh, if you haven't watched Slow Horses yet, boy, do you have a treat in front of you. It is just a great show.
It's good. What did you say this about this? Like, you feel no, I think you said it for Bad Monkey or something else. Like, you're so excited for people that haven't even started watching some of these series because they have so much fun ahead of them.
So good,
So good entertainment. All right, so from the In the Show segment, let's go to In the Know segment.
In the Know.
This is my quick little tip. I would just say you and I have talked quite a bit about the note-taking apps on the iPad. I continue to still lean towards Notability. I've just liked it, but you continue to lean towards Goodnotes, which both are equally fantastic. And I always recommend to folks, hey, you can try them both for free. Like, go and try them just to see which one is going to work best with like your workflow and the visual components on this. I still like Notability, and I got to tell you, the other day I was using it and I stumbled upon something that apparently they built into a new update on this, and I didn't even know. One of the other things that obviously is great about using Notability or Goodnotes is the fact you can use your Apple Pencil with it. And if you have the Apple Pencil Pro or the Apple Pencil, even the generation before that, one of the things you can do is you could be writing, and then if you need to erase, instead of picking your pencil up and going to like the annotation toolbar to find the eraser, you can just tap on the Apple Pencil and it changes to the eraser. And then to switch it back to the pen mode, you would have to tap again to switch back to the pen mode. Now, that was fantastic. I started using that all the time and it just became embedded in my muscle memory, except for the fact though, Jeff, sometimes I would be writing, need to erase, tap, go to the erase, and then either because the way I was holding the pencil or sometimes I just would forget, just even because it was even muscle memory, but I would forget to tap again to go back to the pen mode. So one of the things that a little tiny tweak that Notability made is that they now have Auto-Deselect Eraser. And I got to tell you, it's so small, but it's a little bit of a game changer. So now I don't have to tap to go back to the pen mode. So again, I know this is a little detailed in what I'm explaining, but if I'm writing along in Notability, I need to erase something, tap, go to erase, and then immediately after I erase, pick up my Apple Pencil, it automatically switches back to my pen mode, and I can just keep writing. Again, such a tiny little tweak, but it has helped me. I feel like I'm just even more efficient now in writing because I don't have to remember, did I tap to switch back to the pen? Sometimes you can look up in the annotation toolbar to see if it switched back or not. Now, if you don't like this, because some people don't like it, you can go and it's just simply a toggle in the settings that you can toggle it off. But I have just been thrilled with this. It makes me feel like I am even writing faster now because I'm writing along, need to erase, tap to erase, and then automatically it switches right back into pen mode and I keep on going. That's in Notability. I wish this was an option for the Apple Pencil over the entire iPad, Jeff.
I agree.
I don't think that they've done this.
Agree.
I wish that they had that. Like, all you have to do is go to the Apple Pencil settings in the settings app, and you could just say, I want this to auto-deselect the eraser so that I could do this in Notes, I could do it in Goodnotes, I could do it anywhere. So bravo, Notability, for putting something in that I think makes a really nice, fun difference for me, but it only works in Notability. And Apple, please embed this into something that can work across just put it as a toggle setting, right? You can have it turned off by default, and then for those of us that may want it, we can go and turn it back on in the settings. So that's my little tip to today.
Yeah, that is a good tip. And by the way, in Goodnotes, which is the one that I use, you can enable the exact same feature. But you're right, Brett. It's not system wide.
Okay.
So if I'm in the Apple Notes app and I'm doing a handwritten notes, like you say, you choose an eraser, it stays in the eraser until you go back. So
okay,
anyway,
let me see if I can search for
I
that. Okay,
that
so
one.
that is it. So I didn't look at it because I'm going to Notability. So okay, so there is an auto-deselect eraser in Goodnotes. Okay, bravo. Okay, thank you, Notability. Thank you, Goodnotes, for putting that in right there. And Apple, put it in system-wide, please. Come on. That's ridiculous that we don't have that quite yet.
For my tip today, staying on the theme of Apple Pay and its 10-year anniversary. I just want to talk about a couple quick tips for Apple Pay. Some of these you may
Yay.
know, some of these you
Okay.
may not. First of all, is I think this is the default feature, so you probably have it enabled, but there is a setting. If you go into the settings app and you go into Wallet and Apple Pay, one of the things that you can control is that when you double click the side button, it will bring up Apple Pay, which I just think is the great way to bring up Apple
Oh,
Pay in your
yes.
iPhone.
So
Double
good.
click and it brings up your cards. Second of all, the nice thing is when you double click it, it's going to automatically bring up one of your credit cards. But what if you have
Yep.
multiple credit cards? Like I have
Yep.
American Express, but I also have a
Yep.
Visa because not every place has American Express. And then I have my Apple Pay card because if I'm buying Apple stuff. And so in the settings app, in Wallet and Apple Pay, there is a setting where you can control what is your default card. So whatever you want to use the
Yes.
most, turn that on.
Great
But
tip.
then keep in mind that when you double tap on the side, you're going to see your default card at the top there. Like I can see my Amex card right here, but at the bottom, I still have all my other cards. So I can just tap once down there and I can choose from the list. Oh, I want to use the Apple card because this is a place like
Yeah.
right. In fact, literally this month, I think that Walgreens is running some special that you get like
That's
more
right. They are.
percentage back. I think you get like
Right.
3% back at Walgreens, whereas normally you might get 1%. So maybe I would normally use Amex at Walgreens, but for today, when I buy that whatever, I'm going to actually use my Apple card because I know I get a bit more back. So that's another one of the things that you can control in you can control when you're on the screen by selecting other cards, and you can control your default card. Last thing I'll say about Apple Pay, because I've heard people tell me this a number of times. People have said, "Oh, I want to pay an Apple Pay, but for some reason, like I don't like. Maybe I'm at a concert and my cell phone coverage is really bad because so many
Right.
people are using." But you don't need it. This seems counterintuitive, but you don't need an internet connection to use Apple Pay. When you use your iPhone or your Apple Watch to pay with Apple Pay, it generates a code right there on your device, even if you're not connected to the network in any way, and it sends that just through the contactless, the NFC chip to the merchant. And so the merchant
Yes.
will then later, I mean, of course,
Right.
they're going to need to have a network connection at the end of the day when they reconcile all of their stuff. But just because you feel like you have no connection out there, that's okay. You can still pay with
Yeah.
Apple Pay, and don't forget that. So just a couple little Apple Pay tips, but
Great
such a great
point.
service. I love Apple Pay.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say enough. I mean, again, it's getting to the point where I get annoyed. I think I talked about this last week. If I go to a store that doesn't accept that now, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to have to set my phone down, dig in my wallet, try to find a physical card, and they just kind of look, because I feel like so many people that are on the other side of the cashier, unless I'm going to like a very obscure store of some kind, they get it, like, because they get this question all day long, and it's just becoming something that's just getting so much more accepted, I think, everywhere. And obviously, we talk about the Apple Pay. Obviously, I know there's the Google Pay side, and all of that on the Android, and so it's just, I think there's a much bigger picture going on here. Obviously, that it's just being accepted, the mobile payments, because that certainly is the way that it's around the rest of the world so often. And it's just great to see that it's just continuing to grow here. Happy birthday, 10 years to Apple Pay. That's good. Whew, okay, lots of good stuff. I mean, we could just keep going on and on about Apple Pay, but that's great. That's enough for today. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot that we can talk about even next week. So we'll talk with you next week, Jeff.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.